Good morning, all of you. Welcome back to the channel, and I hope that you all must be doing great. So, let us start with the today's analysis session for 30th of June 2023. So, coming to the first important article for today. So, here, Tamil Nadu governor dismisses the minister and backtracks later on the decision. So, Aryan Ravi communicates to the CM's office that his order on the Sethil Balaji has been put on hold with immediate effect, and he had earlier said that governor did not, basically chief minister said that earlier that the governor did not have the authority to dismiss the minister. So this is again the issue is between the governor and the chief ministers, and this is not just restricted to the state of Tamil Nadu, but even to other states as well, which was evident in the state of Maharashtra also. So, quoting the words of the governor of the state, he says that there are reasonable apprehensions that continuation of the said person in the Council of Ministers will adversely impact the due process of law, including fair investigation, that may eventually lead to breakdown of the constitutional machinery in the state. So, here what is important for us comes the constitutional articles which talks about the discretionary powers of the governor, and so far as for like according to my understanding, I haven't read it that governor has this discretionary power to decide completely on own that he or she can dismiss a minister who's obviously a part of the council of ministers because of this apprehension that his or her decision would adversely impact the due process of law, and then that one decision can lead to the failure of constitutional machinery in the entire state. So that is the topic of issue this time. So we'll take up the important constitutional articles and discuss this topic in detail later on. So, talking about this topic of human animal conflicts, also, so as humans exit, wildlife has the run of Debrigad. So, this is from Bhubaneswar. So, Debrigad is a wildlife sanctuary in Bargarh district of Odisha. It has been made completely free of any human settlement, following one of the country's largest peaceful relocations of the forest dwellers. So, in order to ensure the safety of both humankind and the wildlife, so this can be one of your suggestions as well. So we can take up this like a case study. So as many as 400 families, they have been moved out of their villages after a series of consultations with them. So now with this decision, if you're taking this decision, so what all process you'll be following before coming to this final conclusion. So obviously you need to have proper consultations or the families that you are thinking of displacing to some other place. So in a state where permanent human settlements they are common even within the wildlife sanctuaries, Debrigad it now stands out as an exception alongside the Nalbana Bird Sanctuary in the Chilika Lake. So this is another important fact. So positive impact of this relocation, it was immediately evident in the tangible drop in the incidence of, obviously there would be decline in the cases of man-animal conflicts after the human settlements, they were shifted to some other and safer location. So the relocated humans, they were ensured the basic facilities like electricity, healthcare, and education. And it was also a mandate to make critical wildlife sanctuaries inviolable. So this is both a win-win situation for both the parties. And also, no force was used for relocating the villagers from the sanctuary. And each eligible family, it will be paid rupees 15 lakh as compensation as well. So what efforts you as being the DM, you will take or you will ensure that people, they firstly agree to get relocated to some other location, and then how you'll be carrying out this entire process needs to be the important thing, which needs to be again clear to you. So when we talk about the safety of Indian Railways, so IIT Kharagpur is going to develop tamper-proof signaling system. So obviously signaling system plays a very important role when it comes to the safety environment and the safety structure. So Indian Institute of Technology Kharagpur is developing a tamper-proof signaling system, which is based on blockchain technology for the Indian Railways. So this is a very important point, and it will be like embedded with enhanced safety measures. New system, it would complement the existing data logger system that we have, and which is considered the black box of the rolling stock. So you need to be like aware about what are the other applications of blockchain technology, how it is like different from the conventional technology that we have. So that is some important areas. And how this technology would be ensuring the safety of the signaling system is also an important thing to understand here. So basically, this new system, it would provide enhanced data integrity, transparency, and security. And it would also enable to secure the data sharing amongst the stakeholders, automate the processes with smart contracts, and create tamper-evident audit trails as well. So it will be complementing the existing data logger system, which was limited by its centralized storage facility, lack of tamper-evident data, and limited access control. So all these limitations, they would be addressed by this blockchain system. So again, this topic can be taken as case study, Diamond City in distress. So the Russia-Ukraine war, it has triggered global sanctions. It has like upset the trade in Surat, affecting both demand and supply. So it has resulted in factories reducing the working hours and wages also to the craftsmen, taking the shine off a job that once guaranteed a steady income to them. So yes, there is decline in the exports of the finished products, and that will continue until the war and the sanctions they continue. So that is one of the impact of this Russia-Ukraine war on India, on Indian exports. And obviously this is specific to the diamond exports and manufacturing and their demand. So this can be cited as one of the impacts in your answers because of this war. Coming to the editorial page. So here, let's see what all articles do we have today. So such topics like tracking the change in rural and urban India. These are like very important. You need to have proper data analysis behind what are the changing trends in rural India and urban India in terms of like the share of workforce from the rural and the urban areas. What is the like growth rate in terms of agricultural sector, non-farm sector. So likewise, you can just find out about the basic data, and similar questions have already been asked in the prelims examination. So that's why it becomes very important. So here it is like basically it is theoretically analyzing the thing, and I can't see any data over here. So you can just, search this topic on your own. So this is like article, it is based upon a book. So that's why I'm not going into the details of it. The spiraling food prices, we know that food prices again, they are making high. So policymakers, they must guard against the inflation to ensure sustainable growth. So what changes, what steps can the policymakers they can take in order to ensure that this food prices they cool down. So Indian households they find themselves yet again struggling to cope with a sharp surge in the prices of essential kitchen staples. But as we know that this is because of the seasonal reasons, and we have seen that tomato prices they have more than doubled. So the basically the top commodities which we have top basically it stands for tomato, onion, and potato prices. And apart from this, to be sure, like there's seasonality component to the prices of the farm produce and their supply is largely it is determined by factors including timing of the harvest and the prices prevailing in the market and the mandis when the farmers they transport their crop to the markets. So these are some of the factors which influence their supply. And just last month, we saw tomato growers in the rural Maharashtra. They had dumped sizable quantities of their produce on the roads after being offered unremunerative prices. So this is a common practice which we obviously need to avoid. And who would have thought like after a month, like the tomato prices, they would be more than doubling. So, however, prices of several other food items, including tomatoes, are still substantially higher than even the same time last year, with the model daily weighted average arrival prices of Mondays, as per the government's AgMark website, revealing that tomato prices they almost tripled year on year. So you can imagine when we compare it on year basis, so it is tripled. Then obviously deficiency in the monsoon that would be also having an impact on the food inflation. So policymakers they need to walk the talk and retain the laser focus on taming inflation. After all, RBI's economists denoted this in the latest bulletin as well. And the path to high but sustainable inclusive growth has to be paved by price stability. So obviously, this is one of the important factors which plays an important role and has an impact on sustainable growth of an economy. So in this picture, you can see the tribal woman with their body bound umbrella. So you can see just they have like tied it with their body. This is their body tied umbrella on their way to plant paddy in Karbi Anglong district of Assam. So tribal communities in the hills, they practice jhum or shifting cultivation in the northeastern states of India. Then you need to know about the different techniques of rice cultivation, which is again an important topic, how it is different from this conventional technique and what the important features of the new technique. So here this topic is talking about exploring Assam's delimitation draft. So first you need to be clear with the idea what actually do we mean by delimitation, what are the important constitutional articles, and then what is the issue specifically here in the context of Assam. So what is the Election Commission's draft proposal on delimitation and why the people opposing it, who is going to get affected by this exercise, and why do some parties they want the delimitation done after the National Register of Citizens that is once updated, and is there a possibility of the proposal being redrafted again or not? So we'll be delving into these questions to have better clarity. So how did the delimitation exercise come about? So it is basically the process of redrawing the boundaries of Lok Sabha and the state assembly constituencies based on recent census to ensure that each seat has an almost equal number of voters. So that is the main purpose behind this delimitation exercise. So it is ideally carried out every few years after a census by an independent delimitation commission, which is formed under the provisions of the Delimitation Commission Act. So this is one thing. Now you need to pay attention to the thing that it is not like carried out after a fixed time period. There is no fixed time period. Then such panels, they were set up 4 times, like in 1952, 1962, 1972, and before the exercise, it was suspended in 1976 due to the family planning program. So before the exercise of the next panel, it could be completed in 2008. Delimitation of Arunachal Pradesh, Assam, Jammu and Kashmir, Manipur, Nagaland, they were deferred due to the security risk through the presidential orders. So they were carried out in these states. So in case of Assam, many entities, including BJP, it wanted delimitation to done only after the NRC was upgraded to weed out the illegal immigrants. So Center reconstituted this delimitation commission for the 4 northeastern states in 2020, and Election Commission notified the initiation of the Assam's delimitation in December 2022, following which 4 districts they were remerged with the ones they were carved out of. So that was the result of this exercise in Assam. So how will this proposal pan out? So if the draft that is accepted, so 24 assembly seats, they would be reshaped and renamed, while the number of reserved seats for the SCs, STs, they would be increased from 16 to 19 and 8 to 9 respectively. So that is going to be one change with this exercise in Assam. And the number of reserved Lok Sabha seats, they would also remain the same, but Silchar, it will become reserved for SCs in places of Karimganj. So these are going to be few changes. So why are many people opposed to this proposal? So there have been protests across Assam since this decision was announced by Election Commission of India. So ethnic groups like Ahoms, they are disappointed with the number of assembly seats reduced from the eastern Assam and increased in the western Assam. So this is one area of conflict according to the Ahoms. And apart from this, questions have been raised on Section 8A of the Representation of the People's Act to initiate the delimitation exercise. Section 8A, it only allows reorientation of the seats without any change in the total number of seats. So the use of 2001 census data, it has also raised hackles. So this data was used instead. The latest one that we have is from 2011, but still this exercise, it's used 2001 census data, and Congress and AIUDF, they sniffed a sinister design, especially after the EC used the 2011 census for completing the exercise in Jammu and Kashmir. So in Jammu and Kashmir, we see that 2011 census data was used. So it is also being said that the Assam's delimitation, it could have been carried out along with the rest of India in 2026. So we could have waited for 2026 also. So these are different options, and obviously every people, like different set of people, they have different point of view. So these are some of the concerns which are being raised by them. So some seats, they have been reshaped to scatter the Muslim voters to ensure that their representation in assembly and parliament that reduces. So even that is one of the concerns. So can there be further changes or not? So Election Commission said that the proposal, it was based on suggestions from 11 political parties and 71 other organizations, although Congress it skipped a meeting with the election panel. And EC has also sought suggestions and omissions by July before visiting the state again for meeting various stakeholders. So the instance of the Assam Chief Minister, whose assembly seat Jalukbari would also be affected by the delimitation to safeguard the rights of the indigenous people in view of the demographic changes, indicates that there may not be significant changes. And he also advised political leaders not to worry about losing out if more seats they are reserved for SCs and STs in the greater interest of the state. So the open market sales scheme for wheat and rice. So what is the scheme actually about? How does it work? Why has the government made changes to the scheme? And why has FCI, Food Corporation of India, discontinued the sale of grains under this scheme to states? And how have the states reacted to this decision? So states, they have been looking at alternative ways of procuring wheat and rice after the Food Corporation of India, it imposed quantity restrictions followed by the refusal to allow states to procure the two food grains through its open market sales scheme. So center, it has made it clear that the reason for restricting the supplies per bidder and eventually excluding states from this procurement exercise, it was to curb inflation and regulate the supply. So states like Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, they have criticized the government for engaging in politics at the expense of marginalized beneficiaries of state welfare schemes. So what is this open market sales scheme? So basically under this scheme, Food Corporation of India from time to time, it sells surplus food grains from the central pool, especially of wheat and rice in the open market, to traders, bulk consumers, retail chains, and so on at predetermined prices. So this is done through e-auctions, and states are also allowed to procure the food grains through this scheme without participating in the auctions for their needs beyond what they get from the central pool to distribute to the National Food Security Act beneficiaries. So basically, quantitative restrictions have been imposed upon the procurement that can be done by the states. So that has created basically some issues. So this year's scheme, it was operationalized by the FCI in January, and according to the latest press release also, 6 weekly e-auctions of the wheat have been conducted till March 15. And we saw that the total quantity of 33.7 lakh million ton wheat, it was offloaded. And with this, we saw that the prices of wheat, they came down by 19%. So the next e-auction of the wheat, it will start in June, like 28th, and the bidding for the rice will commence on 5th of July. So what are the changes that have been done by the center in this scheme? So her center, it has decided to restrict the quantity that a single bidder can purchase in a single bid under the scheme. So this is one restriction that has been imposed. And while the maximum quantity allowed earlier, it was 3,000 metric tons per bid for a buyer, it will now range from 10 to 100 metric tons only. So you can see the massive restriction or the massive decline on the quantity now that will now be applicable. So FCI claims that the quantities, they have been reduced this time to accommodate more small and marginal buyers and to ensure wider reach of the scheme. Because obviously when the limit was 3,000 metric tons, obviously the big people or the big players, they would have the advantage. So in order to diversify and basically in order to ensure a wider reach of the scheme, this is what the explanation comes about behind this new limitation. And one of the other objectives is also to correct the retail prices, as allowing the smaller bids should ideally break the monopolies of the bulk buyers, allowing more competitive bids by the small buyers. So to make this entire, bidding process more fair, these are the steps. And first, the center, it is decided earlier this month to reduce the quantity of particular bidder can purchase under this. And notification was also sent to the states. So what has been the reaction of states to this change? So in Karnataka, the Anna Bhagya scheme to give rise to marginalized families, that was a part of the Congress government's poll promise. So that will be get affected. So leaders of Congress, they've accused the center of conspiring to fail the state government's poll guarantee by ensuring that state did not receive the required amount of rice to implement this scheme. So here, basically, it is becoming more political in nature. So even Tamil Nadu, that is also trying to purchase 50,000 tons of rice from the government through FCI. So even they are also running a scheme. So they are saying that obviously they'll be facing now hurdles in order to ensure that beneficiaries, they get the required benefit as promised under the different schemes. So India and Philippines to explore scope of joint sales patrols to boost the defense partnership. So we also had a look at this topic yesterday as well. So even cybersecurity is going to be an important domain. So then apart from this, artificial intelligence and space cooperation. So a new issue that was discussed was cyber tracking. And obviously then we're furthering our defense cooperation also. And in maritime cooperation, that can also take the shape of exercises related to the maritime domain awareness. This could be a combination of many activities. So Russian official briefs the India's national security advisor on the revolt and holds talks on issues in the India-Russia ties. So in the first such New Delhi-Moscow contact since the failed mutiny in Russia, NSA spoke to his counterpart, and they discuss the developments as well as the bilateral and the multilateral ties. So current issues of the Russian-Indian cooperation in the field of security and the prospects for their deepening within the framework of bilateral and multilateral formats, they were discussed in detail. Then they also spoke about the unique strength of India-Russia ties, and the ties have been held steady despite the turbulence in the world. So India's largest radio telescope plays vital role in detecting universe vibrations. So this is a picture of the upgraded giant meter wave radio telescope in Pune. So this is India's largest telescope. That's how it looks. And this is among the world's 6 large telescopes that played a vital role in providing evidence confirming the presence of gravitational waves using pulsar observations. So this has been always like one of the favorite topics of UPSC for the prelims examination about gravitational waves. And when we talk about knowing more about the origin of universe, so such kinds of topics and like questions are asked on such kind of topics. So an international team of the astronomers from India, Japan, and Europe, they have published the results from monitoring pulsars, which are called the nature's best clocks, by using the 6 of the world's most sensitive radio telescopes, including India's largest telescope, which is there in Pune. And the results, they provide a hint of evidence for the relentless vibrations of the fabric of the universe caused by ultra-low frequency gravitational waves. So such waves, they are expected to originate from a large number of dancing monster black hole pairs and crores of times heavier than the sun. So when we talk about digitization from 15th August, only digital payments in panchayats. The government asked the panchayats to choose the vendors by 15th of July and finalize it by July 30. So all panchayats across the country, they will mandatorily use digital payments for development work and revenue collection from this Independence Day, and they will be declared UPI enabled. And this has been issued by Union Panchayati Raj Minister. So step towards digitization and financial inclusion as well. So here, like obviously we have UPI platforms, Google Pay, Phone Pay, Paytm, Bheem, MobiKwik. There are a number of apps these days. So there's going to be an exhibition of notes from G20 nations. So $100 note that features the Independence Hall of Philadelphia, a £5 note from the UK with the part of the Westminster Abbey, and the currency notes from Brazil and Argentina, both featuring the Iguazu National Park that lies on the border between the two countries. They will be displayed, and this is going to be a unique exhibition. So the exhibition Banking on World Heritage, it would feature 5 Indian currency notes, rupees 20, which carries the image of Sun Temple at Konark, rupees 10 note with Ellora Caves, rupees 500 with Red Fort, and 2 separate notes of rupees 100 with Kanchenjunga Mountains and the Gujarat's Rani Ki Vav stepwell. They would be displayed. So out of the 5 Indian bank notes, rupees 100 note with the Kanchenjunga and rupees 20 note, they had been printed before the 2016 demonetization exercise, while the rest, they are post 2016. So again, this topic becomes important also, so you can find about the other dimensions possible. So Turkmenistan unveils $5 billion smart city in honor of the national leader. So it was inaugurated, they inaugurated the Arkadagh. This is the new city. smart city, I should say. It is built in honor of the former strongman leader and it's merging with the most extraordinary personality cults in the world. So Turkmenistan, this is the ex-Soviet Central Asian nation, one of the most secretive countries in the world. So unrest spreads in France over the police shooting of teens. So television images, they showed protesters setting the road barricades and hurling projectiles at lines of police who fired back with tear gas. Several cars, they were set on fire. At least one bank was ransacked. So again, we are seeing instability. So President Emmanuel Macron battled to contain a mounting crisis. After unrest, it erupted for a third day over the deadly police shooting of a teenager of North African descent during a traffic stop in the Paris suburb. So basically, in different countries, we are seeing such instances of race-based discrimination and obviously such actions taken by the police increasing. So even when we talk about the US also, we are seeing that US top court rules against the race-based admission in varsities. So many US officials, they argue that giving advantages to one race is unconstitutional. So artificial intelligence is a growth opportunity for TCS. So impact of AI and machine learning is going to be profound. And he basically, the TCS chairman, he adds that the global energy transition is accelerating and that businesses are making clear commitments toward the sustainable future. So we've already discussed this topic of usage of artificial intelligence from different dimensions. We have also connected it with the GS4 ethics also. And we have discussed it a number of times. Yesterday also we have discussed this topic, so it's a repeat. Coming to the Mint newspaper, so why states are falling short on their capital spending? So we have the data of the top performance and the worst performers. So the data is about their capital expenditure as a percentage of the budgeted amount in the previous financial year. So amongst the top performers includes Karnataka. They've spent 131%, 131% of their budgeted amount. That is basically obviously surpassing the target level. So Karnataka, followed by Sikkim, Arunachal Pradesh, and even Bihar is in the list. So which is obviously a surprise. Coming to the worst performers, so Andhra Pradesh, they've only spent 23% of the budgeted amount. Then Tripura, Nagaland, and Haryana. So these are amongst the worst performers in terms of capital spending. So obviously, Central, it has been incentivizing these states in a big way, but the outcome is far from optimal. So let's understand this topic in more detail. So what's the importance of capital expenditure? So firstly, you need to be clear with the basics about the difference between capital expenditure and the revenue expenditure. So capital expenditure, in simple terms, if you want to define it, it creates capital, it creates assets. So obviously, these improve the efficiency of the economy in the long term. And for example, a port, it will speed up the transportation of goods and people, thereby reducing the logistics cost. And a hospital, it will ensure health as human resources. So they contribute to the future economic growth. And obviously, that's why right now, Center, it is we are focusing more upon increasing capex and, rationalizing our revenue expenditures. So here, revenue expenditure is also been mentioned, like examples includes the salaries or the subsidies which are given by the government. So they do not create any asset and they do not contribute to future growth. They are just, contributing to the present individual growth, I can say. So if a recipient spends the money rather than save it, so that is basically in terms of the like present growth, how they can contribute to the present growth. So capex thus makes an economy efficient, lays the foundations for the future economic growth. So that is the simple importance of it. And who should be spending on the capex? So ideally, the bulk of capex, it should be done by private sector with the government playing a supportive role in this exercise. However, it has been the other way around in India for some years now, as the private sector, dodged by overcapacity, is reticent about investing. So that is why the role of public sector in terms of capex it has become important. And as a result, government has taken it upon itself to invest heavily with the hope that it will trigger the private investment. So how are states? They are being encouraged to spend more. So center is offering states a 50-year interest-free loan for capex. And in the previous financial year, it approved around rupees 95,000 crores for the current financial year, and rupees 1.3 trillion has been allocated under the scheme. So center has also been releasing tranches of tax devolution early to help the states front load their capex rather than wait till the end of the fiscal year. So they're like the amount is being made available on timely basis by the center to the states. So we have already have had a look at the performance of different states in terms of their capex. So what is the reason behind states falling short despite the central government support? So firstly, states they are legally mandated under the Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act to keep their fiscal deficit under control. So they need to stick to this target also. It is not so simple that the amount is being dispersed by the center and the state they are free to spend. Like a lot of number of things need to be taken into account. So unable to reduce their revenue expenditure in terms of salaries, pensions, and the subsidies, they end up cutting down on capex to meet the deficit norms. So since they're not able to basically rationalize their revenue expenditure, so what they do is they reduce their capital expenditure so as to reduce the fiscal deficit. So states experts, they say that they're also constrained by a lack of projects or skills to implement them. And then there are state level political disruptions also which exist, and elections which come in the way of decision making pertaining to capital expenditure. So going with the quote of the day, so a strong majority of the committee participants, they expect that it will be appropriate to raise the interest rates 2 or more times by the end of this year. So this is coming from the Fed Reserve Chairman of US. So as it was reiterated before also that there is a possibility of increasing the rates further in coming times. So this is what again he has been reasserting. So the gold imports from UAE, they fall despite the pact. So gold shipments from the country, they have nearly halved from the previous year to 2-decade low in the year, ended 31st March 2023, despite a concessional duty offered under the Bilateral Comprehensive Trade Pact. And when we talk about the gold imports, so you need to know about the overall picture about India. So India's overall gold imports, they dropped by 23% in previous financial year. And during this period, Switzerland, which is India's largest source of gold imports, it saw its shipments fall by 39%. So gold imports from UAE, they had fallen last year as clarity around TRQ was expected. Then when we talk about the quality of the gold, so what are the changes that have been done by the government that have been announced? That becomes important, the hallmarking thing. And industry experts, they also attributed the fall to the increase in the import duty, which said that they encouraged the smuggling of the gold because import duty has been increased on gold. So basically black marketing of gold that might have increased because of this, because obviously with increase in the import duty, the gold imports, they become more expensive. So a loophole in the regulations allowed many to import the refined gold as platinum alloy, as later it attracted 10.75% duty compared to 15%, which is applicable in case of gold. So since platinum alloy, they have lesser amount of duty, so this loophole was basically misused. And that is also one of the reasons why we are seeing fall in the gold imports, because then obviously it is not being categorized as gold import. It is coming as platinum alloy into India. Then which are the top countries, like we can know about the top 3 or the top 4 countries from which we are importing gold. So that is the important thing. So India and Israel, they're going to boost ties in agriculture. So agriculture definitely is one of the important sectors in case of India. And when we talk about structural reforms, so they are very important. So again, obviously this topic becomes one of the important topics. So India and Israel, they're planning a slew of initiatives to bolster their cooperation in agriculture. So they're planning to push high-level agricultural technology cooperation, and they'll be basically working closely on issues like water reuse, fertigation, soil management, drip irrigation, desalination, advanced filtration, advanced water leakage detection, soilless agriculture, rainwater collection, and treatment systems, and water security technologies. So you can note them down. All of these are the keywords. And obviously, like water security technologies, this is something new. So ISRO, it also plans to dramatically set up its presence in India. So mulch is one of the effective technologies that is benefiting Indian farmers in saving water and protecting the crops from weeds, so that they can save on the chemicals and reduce weeds while ensuring more moisture and increasing the productivity and the quality. So mulch, it is very cheap and recyclable. So this can be used for 2 to 3 years if you maintain it properly. And obviously this is available anywhere in the country, and obviously this is cheaper also. So the yield of crops, it may also increase up to 30 to 35% by using all the tools, including drip irrigation, canopy irrigation, and mulch. And with the Israeli technological intervention in the greenhouse segment, sustainability can be achieved as those are recyclable. So basically, they say that we have the simplest greenhouse technology of several different greenhouses across the globe. And it is not because it is cheap, but it benefits the farmers. So Israel, it also has their like villages of excellence program. So we can learn from how it is operating, how it is different, and how we can, adapt it to the Indian situation. So under this program, basically it was announced in 2022, and it aims to convert 150 villages into model villages through the Israeli technical support on key agricultural technologies. And then there is another thing, that is centers of excellence for the agriculture, which stands at around 30 at present. So Israeli Center of Excellence and Indo-Israel Agriculture Project, it seeks to bring best practices and useful agricultural technologies to Indian farmers. So these centers, they're spread across the country with a strong presence in states like Haryana and Maharashtra. Coming to Financial Express, so when we talk about the financial auditing of different firms, so TCS, it cracks whip in the bribery case, and 6 employees and staffing firms, they've been banned. So the TCS chairman says that for the Tata Group, ethical conduct and integrity comes first ahead of the financial performance. So like obviously, since it is coming from him, so obviously the ethical conduct is much more important than the financial performance of the firm. So again, this can be taken up for ethics. So we are in a tough situation, but we'll come out of it soon, says Baiju. So Baiju Ravindran, co-founder and the CEO, he told the employees that the edtech firm was going through a tough phase, but we'll soon come out of it. So we need to know about what is the issue. That is much more important thing for us. So sources said that also informed that the company is close to achieving profitability at the group level. So statistics is key, it is a key to policy making. So the significance of quality and timely data for facilitating evidence-based decision making needs to be emphasized. And this is also valid in the context of monitoring the progress of SDGs. And yesterday we took up this topic in detail when we talked about the contributions of Mahalanobis and how he would have reacted to the current situation when we talk about the dependence or the usage of technologies like artificial intelligence. So diversifying the supply sources when we talk about the import of the crude oil. So Russia's share in the oil imports touches record 42% in May. So its share, it was like merely 1% before this Russia-Ukraine war. And after this, you can see how India's reliance or dependence upon Russia's crude oil has increased massively. And we now stand at 42% share that is being imported only from Russia. So New Delhi ramps up the imports after Moscow started offering the discount. So since it was beneficial, it was in India's national interest. So that's why we basically started importing more from Russia. So India's crude oil imports, basically here the share has been explained in terms of the amount that we are importing from OPEC and Eurasia. So in the previous financial, you can see OPEC was having a share of 71% and Eurasia merely had a share of 4.2%. Then in the previous financial year, it was at this level. And then in the previous financial year, it was like we saw a little fluctuation and we saw that the share of OPEC, it reduced to 66%. And there was, we can see that, yes, we are seeing an increase in terms of the Eurasia share. And then for this financial year, it would be somewhere around this. So it is, we can say, almost becoming equal. So our dependence or over-reliance, I can say, in terms of the crude oil imports on the OPEC countries has been reducing, which is beneficial because we are diversifying our players and merely relying on few group of countries. It poses kind of a risk to the Indian economy because then also it is important that we are importing somewhere around 80% of crude oil to meet the domestic demands. So if there is any disruption in the supply of crude oil, that can massively impact the Indian economy and its performance. So monsoon deficiency down to 13% and Kharif prospects, they brighten with this. So we are right now according to the situation, the amount of rainfall that we are having, we see that the impact of El Nino as of now is not that strong. So Prime Minister highlights India's growth potential in meet with the Goldman Sachs board. So he said they had a fruitful discussion with the members of the board and key leadership of Goldman Sachs. So the board and the key leadership of the global investment banking giant Goldman Sachs called Prime Minister Modi and discussed the economic potential of India and opportunities it offers to investors. So this was the topic of debate. And yes, it is also important from the perspective of examination as well. So you can write few points about this topic. What is the economic potential of India and the opportunities that it offers, the potential that we have. So what are the different opportunities that India offers to the global firms? And basically, right now, we just saw that we are cooperating with US in terms of the semiconductor manufacturing and the obviously new investments that would be based upon such decisions. Then Elon Musk has also said that his company will start operations as soon as humanly possible in India. So we are also seeing onion prices inch up and it may rise faster by December. So price fluctuations in onion, tomato basically. Food inflation, so retail inflation in veggies has been negative for the year for when we look at the entire year. So it has been in the negative territory. But again, right now we are seeing the prices climbing up because of the seasonal factor. So going by the views of external member of RBI's MPC, he says that may take more than a year to bring inflation down to the target level of 4%. And he says that the current real repo rate will, in my opinion, keep inflation within the tolerance band and gradually align it to the 4% target. So the rate hikes over the last year or so, they are working their way through the economy, and this is suppressing the domestic demand, which is helping in a way in bringing down or moderating the inflation. So right now also inflation risks and they has moderately considerably due to they have moderated considerably due to lower crude oil and the commodity prices as well as abating of the supply chain disruptions. So when we talk about the inflationary expectations, they have come down and they are now well anchored. So with 6 years of GST, 1.5 trillion rupees monthly tax revenue is the new normal. So even after 6 years, the GSTN is unable to connect the supplies in a value chain, resulting in significant revenue loss to the government. So still some challenges exist where we need to work upon. But when we're talking about the monthly tax revenue collection, so even there we are recording new highs. So that is, can be said, one of the achievements of GST. So firstly, we'll take up this article, which was there in yesterday's Indian Express. So we missed it yesterday for some reasons. So first we'll go through this and then we'll take up the today's newspaper. So this is about greedflation. So it's very clear it's combination of two words, greed and inflation. So we'll be understanding in more detail about what is actually greedflation, how it is relevant to India, and we'll be also having a look at the data and the basics of inflation, what are different types of basic meaning of inflation, deflation, disinflation, reflation, what are the causes and resolution when we talk about inflation, what is wage price spiral, what is profit price spiral, this might be a new thing for you guys, and the current situation in India and the policy implications. So here economists, they are flagging corporate greed as playing a role in spiking inflation, even as we are seeing that the workers, they face low wage increase and higher interest rates. So here, when we're talking about greedflation, so it is in the context of the corporate sector whose greed is leading to increase in inflation. So what can be the policy implications of this thing, and is there greedflation in India or not? So firstly, we'll understand this graph. We have two graphs. So first one is talking about the US corporate profits since the Great Depression. So that was witnessed in 1920s, late 1920s, around 1929 or 1930. So after that, how basically US corporates, how their performance profits have been trending. So you can see there was a sharp fall and it went into the negative territory during this Great Depression period. After that, it has climbed up and it has been more or less in this basically this area. This is the upper limit of around, we can say 7%, and the lower limit can be around somewhere 3%. So this has been the fluctuation band. And when we have a look during the COVID-19 period, so do the during 2020, there was a fall, but it was not so massive, or we can say there was a minor fluctuation. And after 2020, you can see how sharply it has increased, or we can say it is possibly broken this upper limit of which was being witnessed around 7%. So that is one thing. Now coming to the profitability at record highs in India. So here we having this graph, which is plotting the net profit margins of the listed companies in India. So again, this is in terms of the percentage, and the data is available from the Center for Monitoring of Indian Economy. So you can see during COVID-19, it was like it fluctuated and it was at the lowest levels. And after that, you can see how new highs have been made. So we can say definitely profitability, it has been increasing. It is making new highs even in case of India and US both. So let's now first understand what the meaning of inflation, disinflation, deflation, and reflation. So there is minor difference, but yes, it is important for you to have the clarity about the meaning of these terms. So inflation is simply the increase in the rate of the general price levels. So I'll not go, and explain these examples, which are also mentioned here for clarity, but you can go through if you are having some confusion in them. Disinflation, it refers to the trend of de-accelerating inflation. Disinflation, basically inflation is there, but the rate has slowed down. So that is called disinflation. When we talk about the deflation, so that is opposite of inflation. Inflation and deflation, they are opposite of each other. So in case of deflation, the prices, they start falling. And there is no inflation in that case. So in disinflation, there is inflation, but the rate has slowed down. And in case of reflation, so it is basically followed after an episode of deflation when we see the prices falling. So when again after an episode of deflation, prices they start to climb up again because of increase in demand of what can be the other possible reasons also. So we again see inflation happening. So that is called reflation. So I hope the meaning and the difference is clear. Now going to the topic of inflation, what the causes and what are the possible solutions available in order to bring down the inflation level. So broadly, inflation, it happens mainly because of two reasons. One is that the prices, they rise because of increase in the input cost. So it is basically cost push inflation because of the it can be because of the increase in the prices of the raw materials. So that increases the input cost. That is cost push inflation. So second reason can be because of the demand pull inflation, that the demand is more than the total supply that is there, aggregate supply that is available. So it is pulled up because there is excess demand in the market. So because of this demand supply mismatch, we have the demand pull inflation. So here also we are having the example like if the price of the crude oil, it increases because of supply chain disruption. That is because of the reduction in the supply. So the general price level that will rise because energy cost that will go up. And then again, another example is that if RBI, it cuts the interest rates sharply, then a lot of people, they will want to cash in on the low EMIs because the interest rate that has been reduced. So in this case, the demand for the homes that increases, and but obviously homes they are limited in supply, or it takes time to build them, so they can't be built overnight. So because of that, again we see inflation. So to control the demand pull inflation, the central bank, it raises the interest rates, or what we call as a repo rate, to bring the overall demand in line with the overall supply. So that needs to be in equilibrium in order to bring down the demand pull inflation. And when we talk about the cost push inflation, so even in that case also, central banks, whatever options it has, it tries to use them the best possible advantage. So even in that case also, when we have the cost push inflation, so there the central bank raises the rates. While this does not boost the supply, but again the central banks do what they can to contain the demand, and this idea is to prevent a wage price spiral. So now we'll understand what is wage price spiral. So if the prices, they rise, and workers, they can be expected to demand the higher wages because prices are increasing. So since there is inflation in the market, so the workers, they would start demanding increase in their wages. But higher wages, they will be fueling the overall demand while doing nothing to boost the supply. So in this case, we'll be having the situation of excess demand, and the end result would be inflation surges further. So this wage price spiral, it keeps on going on, and that's how it fuels the inflation. So raising the interest rate slows the overall economic activity and the demand, and often leading to job losses also. So though unjust, but central banks, they employ this method to prevent a wage price spiral and the consequent inflation. So again, there are obviously positives and negatives of each and every decision. So here, in case of even raising the interest rates, the objective is to bring down the moderate the inflation, but again, it leads to job losses at the same time. So it negatively impacts the economic activity also. So what if the prices they were rising not because workers they were getting higher wages, but it was because the companies they were making bigger profits. So because of that, if the prices were increasing, so what if there's a crisis, like there's a natural disaster, obviously then supply would be impacted. What would be the steps under this situation? And this can happen when the price they markup the price markup is far in excess of the increase in the input cost. So it can also happen when the businesses they do not lower the prices even when the input prices they fall. So that is obviously the motive behind this is to make higher profits. So there are a number of scenarios possible which can lead to inflation. Now we'll understand what is the profit price spiral. So here, when we're talking about the word greedflation, it is used to imply corporate greed fueling the inflation. So that is, instead of the wage price spiral, here is the profit price spiral that is in play. And economists in the US and Europe, they're increasingly flagging greedflation. So companies, they're exploiting inflation by raising the prices well beyond levels that cover their increased cost as a real and a serious problem. So here since we discussed the last thing is this thing only. So it is in a way talking about greedflation. So since corporates, what are they actually basically misusing, I can say, is that because of inflation, they are increasing the prices up to such a level that that is even going that is obviously ensuring that the cost is covered up, but then some profits are also made because of that decision. So that is basically under the greed of making huge amounts of profits. So that is fueling inflation. So we have understood both these graphs. We'll not be going through it again. So talking about the policy implications, so here in one of the 2022 articles, Bivens flagged the problems with the idea that high inflation is due to the economy overheating, meaning that everyone has so much money that there is just too much demand in the market. So that is a situation when we call that whether economy is getting overheated or not. So evidence from the past 40 years, it suggests that it is suggesting strongly that the profit margins, they should shrink, and the share of the corporate sector income going to the labor compensation, that should rise as unemployment is falling and the economy heats up. So this needs to be the change which is desired. And the fact that the exact opposite pattern has been happening so far in the recovery, that should cast much doubt on inflation expectations rooted simply in the claims of macroeconomic overheating. So right now, the exactly opposite is happening of what has been written over here, that the profit margins, they need to reduce, and that surplus needs to be shifted in terms of increase in the wages to the workers. So that basically another situation that is happening simultaneously is the unemployment that is falling and the economy, it is heating up. So that needs to be one of the structural changes. And he recommended temporary excess profit tax also. So that is another suggestion in order to curb the current trend. Like we can impose a temporary excess profit tax. And other experts, they have supported the legislation that bars the price gouging. So the problem is this: one, that it is not established that every firm has exploited the consumers and fueled inflation. And in fact, some studies, they have found no link between higher inflation and the price markups by the firms. So we can't, just take away this decision, because this is obviously on the basis of proper research done. So talking about the situation in India, so an analysis of the corporate profits by the Center for Monitoring Indian Economy shows that profitability, it is at record high since the pandemic in India. And this we have clearly understood through this graph as well. So it seems that the pandemic has done good to the corporate profits. So the continued high profits can no longer be due to increased formalization of the economy or the gains from the high commodity prices. So higher profits, they can only be the result of higher sales that are being witnessed, higher profit margins with the same level of sales. That is also a possibility, and the combination of higher sales and higher profit margins. So according to the experts, 60% of the growth in the net profit, it can be attributed entirely to the increase in the profit margin. So definitely that is playing an important role. And the increase in the sales contributed in addition 36%, and the rest was a bonus from combination of these two factors. So prima facie, there appears to be a good chance that corporate greed that also played a role in the spike in inflation, even in case of India. So this is an extremely important article, something new that we discussed today. Now coming to today's Indian Express newspaper. So jet fuel exports to Europe help meet the summer rush, and it is set for the new record. So Indian export of the aviation turbine fuel could touch an all-time monthly high in June, and the country is likely to be Europe's biggest source of jet fuel. So this also marks the peak of the continent's summer travel season. So again, the Uniform Civil Code topic has been in news. Prime Minister has been speaking about it. So this is definitely, it becomes an important topic, although we have like discussed it in detail. So not taking this up again, you can go through the important constitution articles like Article 44, which talks about it, which is there in the DPSP, and the pros and cons of having a UCC. Currently, the state of Goa, it is already having a UCC, which is functioning there, and why having a UCC is so important for us. Again, this is talking about legitimacy of a uniform civil code. So it stems from three sources: Constitution, Constituent Assembly debates, and the Supreme Court verdicts. So you can basically go through this article. This is no doubt one of the important ones for today. So Punjab DIG named in FIR charged with taking bribe from a drug supplier. So when such higher officials are involved in such instances, obviously it becomes very difficult to resolve such kind of situations. So that is obviously not expected and not something which is to be supported. So the Punjab Vigilance Bureau, it has named the DIG of police Inderbir Singh in an FIR for allegedly taking a bribe of rupees 10 lakh for not implementing an alleged drug supplier in a case under the NDPS Act. So that's there. Coming to the explained page, so India and the chips war, talking about the semiconductor chips. So India has positioned itself as a player in the critical semiconductor tech field with a major US partnership, but it must make up for the 2 to 4 decade delayed start and negotiate formidable challenges that lie ahead. So we have also taken up this topic in the context of what India can learn from China's journey and the steps that it takes. So chips, the new oil, as right till now we used to say that data is the new oil. So now semiconductor chips, they become the new oil. And then we are having like India US ISET cooperation, India's chip challenge. So when we talk about this challenge, so India has allocated rupees 76,000 crores for the semiconductor industry. While there's plenty of optimism, so mission has been beset with difficulties also. So three companies that applied to set up the fabrication plants with the first rank of the government support, they've been named here. So they all failed to get off the ground for separate reasons. So what are those reasons? It is important to address them. So here the government reopened the applications again with the modified specifications in June, and the companies have reapplied. So we are ensuring to bring in the big players, and three things are essential for the chip makers. One is uninterrupted and interruptible power. So power supply is very important. Unlimited pure water supply. Thirdly, chip making infrastructure. So the fabs, which are like famously called the fabs, are the fabrication plants that are highly specialized units. So all these three things are prerequisites for having the upper hand in terms of semiconductor manufacturing for India. And definitely it also requires highly skilled workforce. So industry experts, they have repeatedly said that chip making is not like assembling a phone. So absence of a chip ecosystem, it is why despite the political will, no big international chip makers there has yet shown interest in India. So other than the requirements for chip making itself, a huge set of ancillary industries, they have to take shape, including the electronics manufacturing, who can create a domestic market for the chips. So Taiwan has long been pushing India for a free trade agreement and a bilateral investment agreement to make it more attractive and more attractive for their company, which is TSMC, which is the world's biggest chip maker, to set up the base in India. But Delhi has been reluctant so far. So as India is unlikely to be the manufacturing chips by 2024, when the Micron hopes to have an up and running plant in Gujarat. So TCS chairman said the company will bring in their existing mature supply chains. So these chains, they will either transplant their plants to India and grow their indigenous value addition, or they may be substituted with some domestic equivalent when it reaches that threshold quality and standard levels that are necessary. So there's a kind of a chip wars which is going on. So in 2020, we saw China was the biggest market for semiconductor machines. And obviously, we came to know about all the, we can say, susceptibility because of COVID-19. Because then we realized that we're so much dependent on semiconductor chips on specific country, on China, that it gives them some strategic advantage. So Beijing's Made in China 2025 plan launched in 2019. They had prioritized achieving self-sufficiency in semiconductors. So all things considered, India is said to be at least 2 decades behind the chip curve, and it could take the country 10 to 20 years to establish itself as a serious player in this sector. So for now, though New Delhi, it has positioned itself in the global chip war with a technology partnership that promises to take bilateral strides with the US to the next level. So linking of PAN and Aadhaar is very important. And what can happen if you don't get it linked? So here it is talking about the exemptions. What will happen if you're not getting it linked before 30th of June? So this is the deadline. So taxpayers, they have been warned that failure to link the PAN and Aadhaar, it will render the individual's PAN card inoperative. So if that happens, the individual will not be able to furnish or intimidate or code his PAN, and they shall be liable to face all the consequences under the Income Tax Act for such failure. So some of the implications included is not possible to file the income tax returns because your PAN card will become inoperative. Pending returns, they will not be processed. No refunds, they will be issued. Pending proceedings, they cannot be completed, and tax will be required to be deducted at a higher rate after the PAN becomes inoperative. So a non-compliant individual may also find it difficult to carry out other financial transactions with the banks, as your PAN card is an important KYC criterion. So satellite images appear to show new buildup at the Wagner base in Belarus. So Prigozhin may set up a new base for his militia as rows of long structures were seen in a previously vacant military facility. So India is 67th on the Energy Transition Index, which is published by the World Economic Forum. And a look at the top countries on the index. So the top one includes Sweden, Denmark, Norway, Finland, Switzerland. and 113 out of the 120 countries, they have made progress over the last decade, but only 55, including India, they have improved their scores by more than 10 percentage points. So India is performing really well when it comes to green energy transition. And the body said that the global energy transition, it is plateaued amid the global energy crisis and geopolitical volatilities that exist. But India is among the countries that have made significant improvements. So it said India is the only major economy with energy transition momentum accelerating across all the dimensions. So when this is one of the important topics, given our performance and the pace with which we are continuing with the things. So France was the only G20 country in the top 10, followed closely by Germany, US, and UK. So in India, we see that the pace of thermal power plant expansion has considerably slowed. Those strategies for the early retirement or repurposing of the existing fleet that will play a crucial role. So that's all for today. Thank you so much for joining us in today's analysis session. And I hope the topics are clear. You've understood them nicely. And do subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And also hit the like button for this video as a small appreciation. Thank you so much.